All right, welcome back. Being a Monday, let's talk about politics. But today, let's deviate from politics a bit and focus on matters that shape the political arena in our country with just 56 days to the poll. All right. So a week and a half ago, the Deputy President William Ruto accused the media of bias, that we are not doing our job correctly, or is it? So this is a time that media will be covering elections from all quarters, what is shaping the news items of the day and the criticism and so much more. But are we doing our job as required by law? And on that note, I'm being joined by Mr. Alfred, who is a lecturer of journalism and media studies from the Multimedia University, as well as Bosire, who is a training and consulting editor here in a studio joining me right now. Gentlemen, welcome to the studio.
Thank you.
The last time we were here was sometimes way back. Things have changed. How have you been?
We've been well.
All right.
Yeah, we've been well, and even here the place has changed.
Oh, okay.
All right. Tremendous change.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Wado, how are you doing?
Very well, and thanks for having me here.
Asante.
Right.
So let's start where we should. With 56 days to go, let me start with you, Bosire. From your experience, where are we? Are we getting it right? Where are we as a media fraternity?
Well, thanks, Victor. And it's a very interesting election this time, in that the stakes are very high.
Yes.
It's almost like every 20 years, 2 decades, we have heightened election stakes. 2022, 2022, 2002, 2022 looks like it's a transition period, and from where I sit, I think the media has done its best with the things, the background that went into it just before COVID. So much happened within the media, but all in all, we have done what we could have done best. And I think what has also helped in the coverage is the trainings that have been rolled out to try and help, especially the younger members. There's also been a transition within the media. Many old hands have also left. Newer generation of journalists are coming in. And I think on the balance of 1 to 10, we've done 7 out of 10.
That's quite generous of us.
Yes.
Mr. Sagi, let me get your opening remarks on that.
I would say, because we are at the moment a very crucial moment in our time, in our country, and at this moment, the media, the candidates, and then the public are the most important components in an election. Of course, someone will ask, why are you leaving out the IBC or the police? I would say those are just facilitators, so that these three that I mentioned, the media, the candidates and the public, they meet at a place, an intersection, which is called the public space.
Yes.
And therefore, the media is very important in helping, especially facilitating this process and many other functions that we can talk about this morning.
You know what really happens is that media is a very serious stakeholder, key sector play in an election. And when you heard what the Deputy President said, singling out a particular stations, it raised concerns over the credibility up to that particular point. But how can we redeem it at this point, Bosire?
I think the fact that the deputy, one of the key contenders in the election, was able to point out that the media is doing this, it shows the critical role, the centrality of what we do and how important we are in this election.
Yes.
Because we have multiple roles, like Malima has just said. Our main concern is about the citizen, public. How are we interrogating those issues? A lot of it is also got to do what we call perception. What is the perception and what's the reality? Because we've been doing a lot of media monitoring, there's a background to what the Deputy President did. You know, that there is a feeling that some media houses went out of their way and they've taken a position. Maybe the management, it doesn't have to be.
But is there offense to that?
There is no offense, but when you do it, this is a new paradigm in Kenya. We've not gone out of our way and done what we call media endorsement of particular candidates. And this is going to be an area where we'll have to deal with. But also behind that, how do you separate the ownership versus the editorial policy? Those have been issues. But there's a new area that we need to be approach with open minds and say, it is done all over the place, as long as it's issue-oriented. And I think for me, one of the biggest issues has been is our role as we do more investigation on who. For instance, when we are talking about profiles of candidates, who is in this election? Did we do enough background to know so that we are telling the public? The issue, we seem to be like, when, for example, when you're talking about presidential candidates, we were also getting it there, the IBC has rejected this person because they didn't have a degree or some other quota.
Yes.
That should have been the work of the media to understand who is going to for these elections. So that we have our profiles, that we are not surprised as much as the public is surprised. So we can do more in terms of getting background information, doing our research and knowing what are the issues, so that we are not just caught unawares like it has appeared in the last few days, so that we are on top of the game, as it were. And that has been, I think, where we can do more, and we have the facilities, we have the capacity to do information, do critical analysis so that we can play a better watchdog role. We do critical analysis that we are able to provide more information on the candidates and the general, just mapping it out. That speaks, it's already, the election kicked off. We didn't have to wait for the timelines. People started, IBC was not able to manage the timelines. People got into it. But we needed to do more, and we can still do more, especially in these last phases, to know who is what are the issues. Begin to win ourselves of the personalities and get more to the issues, because we have to reshape this thing beyond being R squared and X, so that we have to bring the issues to the fore. And I think the reason why the manifestos are yet to come, that will be a critical area to know which candidate, what is it that we are talking about as Kenyans. And the media has a role to go behind and get these issues and put them to the public long even before we begin to...
It seems that we're almost way ahead of the park.
I will add, I like borrowing from scholarship and how it informs the practice. One scholar, political communication author called Eric Oloo, he cites 3 rights, and I think he's borrowing from Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And in it he talks about those 3 rights, and the first right is for the public, the right of the public to be informed. And then he also talks about the right of those who communicate, especially the politicians now, for them to communicate, to pass across their policy or their points. He also talks about the right of the media to report and also form opinion. And I think when former Prime Minister Raila was I think, responding to those who criticize the media for complaining that they are not being covered, he was hanging on this line, the last one, that the media also have a right to air their views, to shape opinion. And those who complain, I think you cited in this case the Deputy President, when he complained that his side was not being given enough coverage. He was referring to the first right of the public, right to be informed. And I just like paraphrasing this side of, or rather this part of the Bible, which of course I will not quote the Bible, but I'll be saying that having the right to be informed, then it means that they need someone to inform them. That how can they be informed unless someone informs them? And how can that person be informed, or how can the informer come up unless he's sent? And therefore the reporters are sent to go and cover stories. And when they cover, there are many candidates, their statements being put across. Others are posted using new media, tweets and Facebook and all that. So the media ought to give space for all of them, so that they enhance that right to be informed by the electorate, and also be able to communicate, including that fringe candidate. There's need for fairness across. And then we also need to give the media their space, so that the media can also shape their own opinion or air their own opinion. Opinion is free, and I think practitioners also have their free expression of that opinion.
You know what's interesting, Bosire, is that we report what we see and what is out there in the public domain. Then at the end of the day, politicians will say that media is biased. So where do we cut that thin line between reporting what is in public domain, what the politician said, and business? and an information bit of it?
I think what is important, like Malima just mentioned, that as you inform, the right to form opinion, you don't just form opinion in the air. There must be facts, because if facts are important, they are our menu.
And that's the cardinal rule
in our DNA. That's our DNA.
Yes.
You cannot form opinion based on what you feel. You will, as the media, we have a principal and cardinal role. Very, very important thing that when we form opinion, we will justify it. We do ABCD. It's just an analysis. So once we do, and I think for me the accusation from that we keep referring to from the deputy president, he was just talking about himself. But the right to all candidates, I think he should have extended to rights of all candidates. Done an analysis and say, we are so many of us in the presidential race, and each one of us has got this percentage, and this is it. It was not, it's not based on analysis, just based on what they felt. Because this right does not only belong to 2 people or 3 people. Anybody who has entered that space into the presidential race, the media has a right. They have a right to give them a platform to express themselves and reach their audience. And I think for me, this was a very narrow, from a very narrow perspective, that is only dealing about them, one person. It should have been across all the candidates, because at that time we had about 40, so many guys before, 47 before they were whittled down to what we are. They should have, 47 of us have had this is my share of this thing. And if I've done so, this is what I think was positive information or something. And then we are also talking about a very traditional view of the media. We have new media. How are we harnessing it as candidates? It also needs that they understand that it's not just the TV, radio. It's a whole array of things. And I see a lot of them have gone into social media. They're doing live streams. And they're still reaching the same people. It's just changing methodology. And I think for me, that's why I said that perception, that accusation was misplaced. That it needed to have empirical data on the table on how it has been done.
Right. But you see, much as because you're absolutely right, but then now, the whole aspect of media playing a key role and being balanced. Some of these politicians, you rarely see them somewhere campaigning. So you'd actually fishing them out from their meeting rooms, getting story from them. At that point, some of them are not even willing to give their side of the story. So what are we supposed to do? I go for what's available, what is making headlines. The pictures are out there, because we're also in business at the same time. So who to blame then? We have a right to go look for those candidates. We just don't meet them on the road. We have to be deliberate in what we do. Right. Yeah, there is candidate A has declared interest in it. We have to go and seek the information. That's why we have the tools. For instance,
I saw yesterday I was watching TV and I saw one of the candidates who hardly holds these events, open air meetings. But he was invited although to me it looked like it was a comedy show. So the audience will attach some value to that candidate because he's appearing on a comedy show. He looks more comic. But anyway, the effort was there to get this candidate, even though he does not have rallies. He at least has something to say. And so he was given a platform to say. Another thing that I would also want to probably chip in regarding coverage of the media is how they're being covered. That somebody would complain that is not being given airtime, then the media would decide, okay, let's give them equal airtime. But we also need to check the quality of the airtime that these people are being given. Yes. Because it's one thing to just appear on TV, or it's one thing to give all these candidates 1 minute each. But within that 1 minute each, how you package, how the editors package the story, then for the discerning eye, especially a person who would say has some media literacy, that person is able to discern and tell that the 1 minute package, the content in it was not the same for the candidate. For instance, in the shot, when the shots are being used, I think in broadcast we have the establishing shot, long shot, and then the extreme close-up shot or the close-up shot. Now you get one candidate, maybe his candidate A, he's the first one, or his story is the first one to be aired on TV at 9 o'clock the evening, but the shot that establishes, for example, that covers, so he's on the heads of the people, the crowd that were in the rally, would be so enormous that the person who took the shot and the one who packaged the story edited and ensured that the crowd was well covered.
Yes.
Because we know numbers somehow play into this bandwagon effect, so that you feel like, if I'm not with a candidate who is attracting crowds, then I would rather jump ship from wherever I am and join him. So you get one candidate is given that exposure shot that brings in the crowd, but another candidate is given the first shot that we get on the air,
and that is deliberate.
Yes, and that shot is just him standing on the roof of his car. And then it's 1 minute, but he spoke throughout on the roof of his car.
Yes.
It's deliberate from the people who are packaging the news, or something that goes into setting agenda, how they are framing. But the person out there, place in some place in the village, might not know these details of the media, of how shots are used to manipulate stories.
Are you trying to blow our trick in the business?
Yes, because I think that's why we are here.
Has just exposed us badly.
But that is very true. The framing, the way you do it, how do you give quality time? You know, there are words like the power of the word however, the power of the word meanwhile.
Yes.
Those ones make a whole difference in the way you're going to see.
Yes.
This one is of a lesser kind of prominence, the way we are. The listing of your stories, what comes out, what a person you are giving one candidate air, more voice, the other ones you mute.
Yes.
It's just not a thing that just passes. So those framing is very important. How you slant it, it's all very, very, very technical. Space is the same, but what do you bring? Do you bring the sideshows? You go to a rally X and people are fighting, that becomes your main story. And the main issues discussed there were never given a chance. So that is where we need to work out ourselves.
Or you focus on the empty spaces.
Yes.
Sometimes you can.
But the politicians really understand what makes a story, because some of them have mastered that art. They know there is a bullseye. They know very well that if I hit that bullseye, they're assured of a minute or two or half a page of a newspaper. Some are probably not aware of that trick. From your own experience,
I know a lot of candidates now have employed media guys to run them through the stories. They are very well advised, and they are taken through the paces. When can you get, what are the bites and what everything else? And I think us as the media, we have to get that point where we are, that if we are deliberate and say we want to look at the issues, let's forget about the sideshows in these things. The sideshows can be left for comedy and other things that can be done. That can be the meanwhile thing. But give the people a chance to it, because at the point where they're speaking, instead of maybe focusing on the guy who is a comedian, let's look at what are the manifestos. And we have to ask the question, when you come to Kakamega, for example, what are the issues? So if your reporter is on the ground, you should be able to get a profile of talk to the people. What do you expect out of this campaign? So that your story is richer, not just waiting for the story to happen, so that you are not just a reporter, because that begins to bring the question, are you a reporter or a journalist? What is the distinction?
Yes.
Are you a reporter? Just picking anything and parroting it out, or you're going there to look at facts. So you be a journalist, use your journalistic skills to get this story, because you are not part of that story. You're giving the candidate a space.
You're reporting what's on the ground.
And using your skills and getting the issues.
Yes.
You're giving the citizen the voice. And then out of this thing, the intersection of the three, you're able to become a professional journalist. And then people will say, the Wananchi spoke, the candidate spoke, and because of A, B, C, D, we as the media form an opinion that the issue of education, for instance, has been interrogated well by this candidate. And that's how we arrive at these deductions. It's not just saying we think this is it. It is deductible information from the facts that are on the ground. And background information. And that brings the question, how prepared were we to cover this election?
And that brings the next question I wanted to ask you, because it seems like we are almost the same way we were years back, but what has just changed is that we have got the advent of now live streaming, we have got social media, they have employed a whole, they have their newsrooms working with them.
That's right.
They're going live each and every space. But then, were we ready for this election, or we are just replicating what happened the past elections and what have you?
In answering that, adding to what what he said.
Yes.
I said, and if the mainstream media does not focus on the manifestos or the real story, and then the social media will do it. Or the gaps left by the mainstream media, where are we today compared to years back, 5 years ago, when the mainstream media had the biblical truth. Today, the gaps that are left by the mainstream media would likely be filled by the social media.
Right.
Yes, for example, yesterday's rally in Kakamega, where we didn't see on TV in the evening the story of buses, the yellow buses, but then the mainstream media will pick it up. Somebody from either on the ground, he's asking questions like, where are these buses going to?
Yeah.
But we don't expect that story in the mainstream media, and therefore the issue of where do politicians get the people to fill their rallies? Such stories are not told. So you might ignore the main manifesto, but someone, maybe the active people of that party, the active supporters of that party, will have a way of bringing it up. And if it's something, for example, the issue of Mitumba recently, it looks a small thing, but then the mainstream media knows how to hype it up until it overshadows everything else. I don't think, not mainstream, the social media. The social media will hype it up. The mainstream media, they steal some decorum, some level of responsibility, that they might not get something and twist it. But the social media can get something so small and twist it, and maybe bordering on the aspects of propaganda creation. Yeah, so we need to know or understand that we operate in a space where the social media...
The politicians are mostly focusing on the mainstream media, because when you look at what the social media does, they only take the comical part of it.
That's right.
Or they do the nitty-gritties to sell. But as per the mainstream media, we are in sharp focus.
Or even a simple slip of the tongue, for example, in the prayer meeting, so that it overshadows all the points, and people focus on
whatever was happening at that event.
Exactly, yes.
But then, Bosire, you know what? We are still the main players in... When you talk of election, we are part and parcel of that process. And, you know, the media players, talk of the Media Owners Association, the Media Council, Editors Guild. Anytime there is a function like this one that is now ahead of us, media plays a key role. Imagine a situation where media is left outside the room and other players are left to run the show. Give me a scenario.
That would be disaster. Then you're in total blackout.
Give me a scenario, right?
Yeah, you can imagine where everybody's in the dark. There will be anarchy, because people need information, because elections are about information. If that information element is left out, then it will be like in the jungle. If, for example, nobody knows which candidate is there on the ballot, what are the choices on the board? What are the preparations on this? So what is my right as a voter to, what do I do? There will simply be no election. That will be a selection, because some people will sit somewhere. Because the election, the key person at the election is the voter. And the voter needs this information. Because all these people must reach the voter, convince them, and ask them, I have an agenda for you to vote for me. So if that information is not reaching the voter, then we don't have an election. I don't think that can be defined as an election. That will be another process. But it is important, now that we talk about the centrality of media, how... Because we're in a very unique position, like I mentioned before, that we now have media courts that are accompanying, working on the side of the politician. Some of them are people we've worked with as recently as 3 weeks ago. So we find we are caught up in a space, somebody is serving certain interests. So it's like we are engaging in what we call friendly fire among ourselves. The ones who are in the either side of the divide and the other side of the divide. So this friendly fire, some of it is confusing, because confusing. They know the tricks, they know what our skills are, and they know where the gaps they can plug in. And once they don't, they're the first people to call out and begin even to say, in my private, I know Ken, because we have had private conversations. They use my private conversations to frame me that this is my slant, which is wrong. So this friendly fire aspect is something that we have to look at. The other thing that I think I have observed lately, our interviewing skills are a big issue. Do we sit to train, prepare ourselves, brief, debrief, before we go for assignments and after we come for assignments. That doesn't seem to be the case, because somebody's got a mic and saying, what do you think you should tell us? No. Ask the question. Those questions,
what do you think you should tell us?
Yes, yeah. Those are the questions you hear very many people in the mic and say, finally, I think this constituency is like this, was like this. They don't have statistics, they don't have information. So in the end you say, back to the studio, but you've told nobody anything.
And the public will say, exactly, so-and-so was interviewing himself.
Yes.
Right. When you let the interviewee run away with the show, with the interview. So I think he's right in saying that there's need for those who interview to be retrained or be given a brief on what to look for in that interview. Okay. But you might be given a brief by the editor, but then when you reach the place where you're interviewing, especially when it is in the domain of the interviewee, he somehow has an upper hand over you, and they like to twist the interview in their favor. Right. Yes.
Okay. Let me think what you're saying.
You've got to be creative.
Exactly.
And you have to know the person you're interviewing. If you're interviewing
you do
X,
a background check.
You have to know. You're not a stranger. That's why preparation is important. What are the likely scenarios? There are candidates who are overbearing. They will run you out of the studio. So you have to know how to manage them. It's your show, not their show. So you must be in control. And if you think you're losing it, there must be creative ways to get it down. And insist, if your question has not been answered, make sure that you can reframe the question and get it. You can't just ask a question, if you don't get an answer, then say, okay, he refused to answer. You have to find a way to get this question. And you can only do this if you prepared well and you add the issues. It's not something that is happening because it has to happen. When you go into an interview, you know, from X, this is what I want to get from them. You know them, how they react. You know their phrases. You know how they intimidate people, they dominate the shows. So that is important.
It can be a bit different, because when you go on the ground, they say, "Kwa ground fit is different." You go to a political rally, you're expecting them to say such as whatever they wanted to say, and it completely changes to a different thing. Just let me take a break, and when we come back, we're still going to have this discussion, because we are opinion shapers, and at the end of the day, we call the shots at some point.
That's right.
So let's discuss that when we come back after this break. Welcome back. We are just having a conversation here between a reporter and a journalist, the same way we have got lawyers and advocates. Do you get the difference? Okay. Mwalimu, from class, journalists, reporter, the difference? One, we all have reporters around.
Okay. The wholesome collection, preparation, and the dissemination, I think would fall in the category of journalism. The gathering, the preparation. But a reporter can be anyone on site, or the way we do on social media.
Even an eyewitness.
Even an eyewitness, or social media platforms, all of us are posting something. We saw some crazy person, took a picture of that person, you posted it out for us, or a friend of yours at the beach. You are a reporter, but that does not make you a journalist.
A journalist.
Yes.
All right. Okay. So let me start with you, Bosire. How important is the media sector? When you talk about covering an election, there's the business aspect, and politicians are also fighting for that space. How do we balance those spheres?
I think the word here is fidelity to professional ethics. There will be a business that you need, but what is the long-term effect of that business? So the decisions have to be based on sound knowledge, sound skills, and it's a very thin line. If somebody, for example, let me just ask this, somebody came with, you want business, and somebody came with an advert and said, all these guys are cockroaches. He's paying you $1 million bob to run it on page 1.
Yes.
Are you going to say, it's the money I'm going to go, or the message that you're going to go? That judgment calls for you, yes, the money, but what is the import of what is the consequence of me running this advert? So that's where the balance has to come in, that the business has to be moderated, and within, that's why those adverts that are coming, we take time to look at them and say, what is the message? What do you want to pass to the public? It's not just about money. If we go for all money, we can get anything. But we have a public duty, and even what we call a democratic and patriotic duty to make sure that the whole unit of Kenya as a country still stays Kenya. Because if we blow it up, then even as we still exist in that space. So you professional ethics, because we have a code of ethics of the practice of journalism. That should be our guide in the way we are going to do this business of ours. We are in the business of information. The other commercial aspects which will come in, but they have still the bigger picture that we are journalists. Because they can, if they want to do an advert of any kind, they can as well hang it somewhere on the walls. But they are using this space, but they're coming into our space. That space has to stick and relate to the rules. And the good thing is that we have done a whole code that tells us how to handle the business. And where there is conflict, there is always a law. Because the Constitution itself in Article 33, 34, and 35 defines how we exist. And we are creatures of that Constitution. So we cannot do anything outside the Constitution. Then we have come further to the industry. We have developed our code that guides us. You as an editor, this is your responsibility. You within the advertising, what do you bring out? And at the end of the day, we have to do some fidelity to our code of ethics and the law.
Absolutely. Well, in 2007, 2008, media was largely blamed for feeling the violence that was witnessed then, because we would actually, perhaps we could say that it was something which was new to the country. So each and every station would run with a story. First of all, an editor would say, chukua hiyo, the way they say, run that story, run that story. What's happening somewhere in location X and Y? At the end of the day, media played a key role. But have we changed? Have we learnt our lesson to this particular end? Because when you talk of an election, animosity, which was way back then, it was spontaneous, but media played a key role. Where have we reached to this far?
Okay, apart from reporting, apart from telling stories, media also propagandize on behalf of certain interests, certain players, for example, owners.
But is it wrong? Is it wrong to take sides?
You would not, the way he said, that you can take sides, but you should not let the truth be sacrificed at the altar of the interests of those ones that you play for.
Absolutely.
Those ones who hired you, the interests of advertisers and other interests, even your own interests as an editor, what you call the elite values that you bring in on board. You cannot sacrifice the public interest at that altar. So the media, there has been a change. But there's one fundamental or one bottom line that seems not to be changing, that media owners during elections sometimes want to rear their heads. And you somehow can see how the stories are packaged. You can easily tell where the allegiance of these reporters, of these journalists in this media house lie. So the change might have been there in terms of maybe infrastructure, the control, the glamour in it, the addition in, for example, having that touch screen that CNN normally has during the American elections. We see it nowadays in our newsroom. But the software in the media houses seems not to have changed so much, because sides are being taken. Yes, it's not wrong, but sometimes even in taking sides, then you also need to inform the public, playing the three roles of facilitating. You have to monitor also what is happening, for example, during elections. What are some of the things that are being left out? And you also, at the end of it, once in a while, need to be radical a little bit, telling what someone wants to sweep under the carpet, especially the political players, those who are campaigning. So you need to call it out. We used to have some segments, I think, in the last general election where the media would call out on the facts and the lies. I think that's a radical approach. Yes, they say it, but they seem to be giving us half-truth, because in the propaganda, in giving propaganda, the politician would thrive in that, but it's upon the media also to tell the people the truth. If it's a white propaganda being given, then give us the full truth.
Yes. Ken, in the morning you sit with the reporters in the newsroom, you come up with the stories, the docket is there, say, okay, Victor, go do story A, so-and-so go do story B, you go and cover this function and what have you. But politicians, the moment they see microphones, the moment they see cameras, they say, I've seen banner for station X, Y, and Z. Then they take their heads on a vacation and they speak whatever they want to speak. You as an editor, you have to publish a story nonetheless. You have to publish a story. A reporter must come up with a story and you have to do it. At what point do you say this is a story and this is not a story?
I think before I even answer that, I think there are certain tools that are now available to us as journalists.
Yes.
The fact checkers, Sure. We have to, not everything that is said, we must fact check it, verify before we can run. We don't just say anything that goes because it has been uttered. We have the tools, we have the training, we have the skills, we have the codes, we have the law that determines us. And in the course of editing, if something, you can debunk it straight there. We have the tools now, you say, he said this, but this is the fact, that is it is. Yeah. So that you are saying, you're in a way also educating the public. This person said this person is a liar. He has lied, it's an untruth. Because we are in the business of giving, truth can never be sacrificed. That is our, truth is what we stand for. Facts is what we stand for. And context. Once you do all those things. So what is the context that this person was speaking this against? Is it verifiable? Is it a fact, or they want to say, or they just want to play, they want to do propaganda? And it's our duty as an editor. I would rather not publish a story that is going to hurt the general public, because my audience as running a story because I have to run for a story. Every story has to merit its space. It must be so hard being in a newsroom at this particular point in time. Yes, every story has to merit its space and airtime. It's not just because I have to balance. Balance what? Someone between night and day. Yeah. So, but it's important because there are many stories that happen in the field. You go, I may have told you, I want you to look out for this one. But there are other stories that are coming from the interaction of the voters and the politicians. What are the issues? What are the opinion shapers also speaking to this particular area? Yeah. Like if you're in Nairobi, you will ask yourself, a politician will hold a rally at Uhuru Park. Why are they holding a rally at Uhuru Park? At Nyayo Stadium, not at Uhuru Park. There's already an election issue that the park is closed. So those are shifting things that will speak to what we are doing as projects, because the story is a complete ball. There are many facets that the way you pick. Yes. What do you do because your angle? You can never miss a story from any kind of activity. It just, unless you close your mind, unless you're not trained, then you don't see what you say. There's no story here. There's a story everywhere in every activity. Sometimes we walk, sleep, and kick off these stories. So you have to be an open-minded person. Yeah.
Because for, in this particular point, journalists will always create a story the way he's putting it. Sure. But that story has to get some background check on it. That is a cardinal rule. You have to be factual. So a politician will take a microphone and say, because Ken said this, I'm going to do that. At what point, as Mwalimu, you put it, at what point are we going to have a politician speaking the truth? Because for them, whatever they say, for them, that is politics. So it's now upon you to sieve what's going on there and what to go and print. So how do we balance them? Do we have that watchdog and tell them, no, politician A and Y, that is not the truth. Speak the truth, and that's what I'm going to report. Okay. So have we got to that point?
We have, and I have always been.
Yes.
In a place where you scrutinize what is being said, especially against, he mentioned ethics, against the ethics of the values of the society. So that if what is said by the politician goes against the grain, against the public expectations of the values of that country or of those people, then you also need to sieve it out. You will also measure what a politician is saying against the law of the land. For example, you cannot just go all covering the story just because it was said when it contravenes, for example, laws touching on obscenity, on copyright, and many other aspects, defamation and so forth. He might say it in the spur of the moment. And of course, they always do. They speak the spur of the moment to work to the gallery. They're pleasing the crowds. And some certain politicians, I think as a journalist, you'll always expect so-and-so is going to talk. He always stirs up some trouble when he says, and they thrive in it. So the journalists, sometimes I've seen our media houses would give them minimum time or simply black them out. Even a leading candidate the other day said in a rally, I don't want to mention the name of the candidate, he said something that during... it really excited the crowd. It was a word bordering on obscenity. But when he was given airtime, even though he was number one or number two in the news in the evening, that statement was blurred out by the media.
Yeah.
So there's always there's some marking scheme or a rubric that you can measure that person against it, and then end up giving us something.
Yes, Ken.
I think we've done well in the sense. I want to bring it closer to last night. We had an interview. It was on with the deputy president. He spoke. He put so many facts, but the main interview, Joe Ageyo, kept on reminding him, those facts are with you. I have no way to verify it. You talk about this. Right. And that was a very important intervention that he kept telling him. You're saying you spend so much. I have not seen your manifesto. You want me to talk about a manifesto which you've not produced? So that's the way to do it. He will speak, but remind him, I do not have this. So the public knows it is his word out there, and there are no facts to check. Right. And I think for me, I watched that interview and I said, this is the way it should be. You must remind them, well, you've said that, I do not have no way of verifying because I do not have the facts. Yes. And that's where you do the balancing. And as you do this, you can only do that if you have the presence of mind and you've prepared well. And you know, if you're talking about 100 billion shilling economy, do you know facts? What is our GDP? What is our collection? What is our... Have you done the math about that budget? Where is the source of this money that you're promising? Yeah. And if you do this, how feasible it is for us to begin to ask those questions. And once you ask the questions, then you're adding value to the coverage of the election. And if you do not do that, then you're just what we're calling a reporter, parroting, just like you may tell your parrot, say yes, it will say yes. Yes. We are not just giving them space for them just to speak, but to discuss and tell the public, but also interrogate them. Interrogation is our business. So because we can only interrogate if we are knowledgeable. For example, today if you asked how many, you're talking about how many people are going to vote. What is demographic? We are talking about the youth demographic in this voter election. Do we know their numbers? We're just using percentages which are sweeping statements. Yeah. How many of them? Have you done constituency per constituency profile to know how many people are below 35? The records are there. But have we gone to look for them? How many women are there? We talk about women being the majority voters. Is that a fact? Yeah. Or just another one of those myths that we carry around? What is the turnout? You can do last 5 years. What is the turnout of... Because those facts are with IBC. You know who voted where. Yes. And how many of them voted. So this is an exercise for us more than ever, that our facts are going to be our own anchors and foundation in covering this election. And we do that once we have the facts and the knowledge. We'll put context to it. Yes. We'll verify. We'll debunk. And most importantly, stick to your professional ethics. We all have opinions, but those opinions must not be seen in the story. In 2007, for example, there are reporters, they were so embedded. You know, there's a difference between being embedded, where you're put in a place because you can find information because of your special relationship, special knowledge and interest. You give us information that we expect that any other reporter can get. We embed you. But in the end, some people get bedded. So you have to make that distinction.
That's a dangerous direction.
On the same, some of my students
answer that. I will ask you this question of media and democracy as you answer that. In terms of just strengthening and widening the democracy that we enjoy right now, how have we created that space as a sector? As you respond to that as well, give your contribution.
Okay. Yeah, it was just to add something, an illustration where my students in a discussion, the embedded part, they say that one of the lead reporters of one of the TV stations, when he tells the story of a certain political party, he sounds like the mouthpiece of that party, because he has reported their story so much, he's been embedded with them until he has gone to bed with them. So he sounds like one of them. And I think that's, I don't know what, it's something left to the editors.
Trying to say.
left to the editors to try and at least
to decide.
Keep on withdrawing some of them and bring them so that they don't just tell. Maybe they send them because they understand that political party and how.
Could it be because of the institutional memory, or could it
probably yes?
Okay,
could
all right,
yes.
And even a special relationship that you have understood that ecosystem where those guys operate. We give you the advantage. One of the key players in that could be your critical contact that you've used over the years. So your foreknowledge, if you call him, they will pick, oh, Victor. They will give you the information you need.
At the snap of a finger.
Yes. That's the knowledge with which we want you to understand the ecosystem. But you see, we cross the line. You've seen cases in the last few weeks where some reporters have gone, and the politicians, the MC has gone ahead and asema, huyu ni mtu wetu. Do you know the safety implications of that statement from the podium?
What you call has been bedded now?
Completely.
And that is dangerous.
Subsumed, consumed.
All right. So let me come back to you, Mwalimu. The aspect of media and democracy, where are we at this particular point?
I think it depends on the season. Now that we are in election, there are three stages: the pre-election period and the election period, and then after the election period. Our media tend to be very active in the middle, this during campaign season. But then at the stages of formation of government, yes, they do some good coverage at that time, telling us who is in the cabinet, and then digging the backgrounds of some of those ones who have been included in the cabinet. But then after that, they tend to withdraw. So that period from one election until the next, they go into their mode of just entertaining and looking the other way when the government has not fulfilled its promises. And I think after the election, then the media need to be active. And I like this one, it's become a global practice where the media will always put the new government to account within the first 100 days. That one we've celebrated, I think, is something that I started seeing in the last after the last two general elections, and I think that's a first stage of facilitation, or what we would call the watchdog role that the media plays to enhance our democracy. Like Barack Obama, former American president, speaking to the Ghanaian parliament, he reminded us that democracy is not the occasional elections that we have after every 5 years. Democracy is what happens in between. And I expect our media then to play an active role in the in-between. Because that's when they will truly be enhancing democracy. And it is for that reason, or going to sleep, not to bed this time, but going to bed, going to sleep after elections, that we've done our part, hallelujah, then we can go back into our entertainment.
Which shouldn't be the case. We should continue doing the follow-up
exactly.
of it each and every time, even after an election.
Exactly. Otherwise, we become lapdogs. Just sit in the hands of politicians, being called, come here, go there, without informing the citizens to help them improve the quality of life. Because when you put politicians or a president or a government to account after first 100 days, then you're helping us as citizens to improve our quality of life, and by extension, improve our quality of our democracy.
Perfectly put.
I like what Mwalimu has did. There are 3 dogs now in the media. There are 3 dogs. There is the lapdog, there is the watchdog, and there is the guard dog. So
we have 3 dogs now.
There are 3 dogs within our space. So once we understand these things, but like he has said, an election is not an event; it's a process. It's a cycle.
That's right.
So we have the pre-election, post-action time, when like now we're going to vote. This is the actual campaign period as part of that process. And then we have the post-election. Post-election, means after the announcements of the
6
made,
months or even 1 year, because
it is
now we have
continuous.
Yes.
Because after that there is formation of government. Who forms that government? How are they going to be faithful to the institutionalization the tongue has gone to bed. To institutionalize what we call the elements, the stakeholders that uphold democracy. How are we going to cover who becomes the head of the judiciary? Depends on how that is going to function. How are they discharging their roles? The police, how is the treasury, and all those other stakeholders that form the broader ones called the three arms of government. Yeah. The legislature, the judiciary, and the executive. Who forms it is one of our institutions to know that their performance must be our business to interrogate them. That is the way we can enhance democracy. And once we do this, because they are all instruments of governance, so we must keep them on check. If the judiciary goes to bed, goes to sleep, then we must point out. If the executive parliament is passing laws because they have just to pass laws without interrogation, yes, it is our business. That's why we have we have parliamentary reporters. Their business is to keep everybody alive, that the people you elected on the 9th of this day, this is how they have performed. That's why we have got what's caucus.
For the last 5 years, this is the track record.
That is our part.
Yes.
To inform, to watchdog them, not to lapdog them or guard them. We must play our watchdog role. It is even more critical in the post-election era, because it will have an impact at what we're calling the actual polling. The quality of leaders we get. How many times do we put our leader, somebody has been given a position, does he stand the test of the chapter 6? Right. It is our importance. It's not just say, this is so-and-so has been appointed. Who is this person? What do they stand for? Do they fit the bill? That is the business of media.
And I think that's when the media becomes the fourth estate.
The fourth estate. Gentlemen, allow me to take a quick break, and we come back. I'm going to take your quick closing remarks. And yes, the last question I will ask you is, how are we going to shape this election in specific? All right? I would like to get your point that when you come back, as you get your closing remarks after this. Right, welcome back, and on to the last bit of this discussion. Today we are talking about media and election, now that we have got slightly less than 60 days to the poll. So, gentlemen, let me get your closing remarks, but as you do that, let me ask you this particular question. How important the key role that media is going to play in this general election? Because as it is, 2022, it's been spoken over for the last 5 years. 2022, it's now here. So what is that key role that this particular industry is going to play to shape the democracy and this election come 9th of August? Starting with you, Ken.
Media at this point in time is very central. Everybody's watching it, because we're going to give the space, the voice of the citizen, who is voter as well, to educate them, to inform them on what are the issues. 2, the candidates are looking for a platform to interrogate, to sell their manifestos. And the media is this platform they're looking for, whether it's digital space or the legacy media. 3, the media itself comes into play about its ethical grounding. How are we behaving as the media, so that we can elevate ourselves to a point where we've been most trusted. But our trust test will be much more this year because of those two, this expanded space, and then the perceptions that have been created about who supports what. So we'll be watched very closely, and it's out of this that it's important for us to rise, be factual, debunk, and context everything. And as we do this, we are moving to what we call issues. Already in this election, there are issues that are coming up and we need to play up to them. The economy.
Yes.
Which is really about us, the whole country. There is the gender card, which is also coming up. We need to play it, knowing that we failed in enacting the 2/3 gender rule. That gender card is coming up. The youth element. And those for me are the three issues that and then the other social sectors like education
yes.
and health. We do this by interrogating what is the outgoing government put as a manifesto.
Yes.
Did they deliver? If they delivered, how effective? And arising out, because the players have never changed in this country. They're just changing, they keep changing T-shirts. The person who was on this side, the deputy president, was part of the outgoing government that had an array. How did he score when he was on that side? What was his role? The person who was putting the government in check, has come now to play for the team. So there has been a change. We must understand that the changed political environment, especially the political parties bill that was changed, reshaped so many things, and we have to be alive to those functions. That for once, we are transiting for what we call ethnic-based things. This was meant to bring issues, and we must begin to walk that space and show the way. And we can only show the way if we remain professional, we context our things, understand everything, and interrogate issues as they are, as opposed to what we are being told. It is most important that we put issues, then we shed off the aspect of being labeled that we are biased. Because a fact can never stand on its head. It stays where it is, and you highlight it, put knowledge around it, and give more voter education. Tell people, these are the issues, this is the process that we're going to do it. Because processes are as important as the election itself. Have we followed them? For example, what is the preparedness of IBC as the big referee in this thing? Have we interrogated? We're just throwing statements. We are letting politicians give us statements. It's not politicians should give us statements. We should be the ones who should telling the politicians these are the gaps.
From them.
And I think this is where we are letting other people carry their agenda. We must regain our space very fast and with a matter of urgency, that we are the ones who give the information, not the politicians, and our work then becomes. And we stop being just reporters. We can be but we have to be journalists once in a while.
I see Mwalimu getting worried when we say that we stop being reporters, we have to be journalists, because right now he's going to class and you're going to shape more journalists out there. But as that is happening, Mwalimu, the whole aspect of 9th of August is coming. A few days, not so far from now. How is the Kenya media, because we're also expecting international media to have that sharp focus on this election. So we are going to be the trendsetters, even before other international media houses, beam their light on us. So how are we going to play a key role in shaping this election?
Okay. Yeah, first of all, I'll put a caution that the ordinary person who consumes media products in Kenya is not a foolish person.
Yes.
They have come of age. They have been educated in various aspects, not necessarily in my class as journalism scholars, but they've learned what is happening out of their own ways. And so this person has become alert, and therefore there's this line that Kenyans like using that says that the things that the media will not tell you. I think you've seen it on social media platforms. So the ordinary citizen goes into share.
Bosire will tell you that one very well. What will not splash out there in the newspapers?
Yes.
What story 1 or 2?
Exactly.
What will not tell?
That citizen has a way of getting that story. And somehow when that story has done its rounds, and then the mainstream media begins to get embarrassed, and then they go after it when it's trending already, not as a result of mainstream media coverage, but as a result of social media. Citizen journalists getting involved in storytelling. So one thing that our media need to do is to go after what would tell not just good, but the truth about our elections. I remember 2002 when one of our radio stations, which is popular today, was born at that time. I don't want to mention to give it a free time here, but that radio station was born as a result of sending reporters across the country, and we sat somewhere with my colleagues, my friends, somewhere in a slum in Langata, and we could tally the results of the elections, not necessarily from Bomas, but from that radio station. It became very popular. Now, the media has to make a choice, whether to go for what we did last time, go for the Githeri man, or tell the story of the election. So you ought to tell the story of the election. And we also need to understand that in this election, there's nobody called a fringe candidate. If you do make that assumption, then the Toto of Bomet would be born, and perhaps maybe at national level, more young people who look like they're fringe, or some women who look they are fringe candidates, they will come in. And so the media need to be alert and know that there's no fringe candidate out there. We also need to give, when the European Commission comes to monitor elections, normally various bodies come in, and the European Commission is always one of them. They always check on how the media space has been utilized and has been availed to the various candidates. So we need to avail our space to women, we need to avail our space to those so-called fringe candidates, and then there's also the special role of the public broadcaster. KBC has I think a very important task during this election. People are looking for the story, and so KBC has to be fair in telling, or rather giving space to all the candidates. Finally, I will say that in also receiving money for advertisements, I don't think there's money that is sweeter. Let's say the UDA money is sweeter than Azimio money. Neither is it money that is sweeter than Wajakoya's money. So money is money. Money is money. Yeah. So the parameters that have been set for receiving money from a certain candidate, I think need to be applicable to all, without favoritism.
All right. And Victor, integrity on our part will earn us the credibility that we are looking for. Integrity in our individuals as journalists is important and critical. It is all about our credibility. Yes.
Thank you so much. I think from the broadcaster's desk, I think I just have to clear that we are fair. All right. As Walimu said,
you've done one.
We are fair.
You've done one.
Thank you so much. Gentlemen, always a pleasure having you. I always say that anytime I talk to you, I will feel that I go back to class 101. All right.
Thank you. You're welcome.
All right. Thank you so much. So, Ken Bosire there, editor, as well as training consultant, as well as Mulimu Alfred Usagi, who is a journalism and media studies lecturer at the Multimedia University. Thank you so much for your time. Let's take a break. We'll be right back with more.
Okay. Thank you.